Hello, and welcome to the inaugural content recap for the Zonez project. Now, what is this kind of recap going to be about? It's mostly just going to go over some of the stuff that we've created on live streams over the last couple of days, and what I've kind of been working on off camera, just touching up the more tedious parts of the project that are kind of done off screen, and the stuff that we make just all combined together, kind of recapping what has been made and giving you updates on how the project is coming. This will be a lot more easy to consume content and a lot more digestible than the long form content that's being brought over from the live streams over to the YouTube channel. So I expect these videos to kind of be the alternative to the very time consuming video live stream videos. So let's just move right in. So what you see in front of you here is the landmass slash country that we will be residing in and telling our story upon. Although granted, we did drop a semi-detailed map of the landscape for the country, which does remain unnamed for the moment, as we don't want to settle into too many restrictions early on. Although we could give it a name and then change it on later, but I want to give it a proper name that suits it well. And for now, I'll leave it unnamed, and then we can decide on a name at a later time. But for now, we have it drawn up, and this is where our story will take place. Although granted, not exactly, because this map isn't misleading in any way, but it doesn't really show how much of the story is going to take place. Because if we look at this tiny square here, this is the city that our setting is based in, and this is where 99.9% of the story is probably going to take place. Probably something wrong with that statistic I just gave out because of how absurdly high it is, but it gives you a good indicator of how much time we're going to be spending in the city versus how much time we're going to be spending exploring other areas and regions. Mostly these will be used as places to refer to, so characters will say, I'm from so and so, or this thing from so and so, or this product from blah blah blah. It kind of serves to do that, although that does not mean that we cannot stray away and visit these areas at a later point during arcs and storylines that are well suited for exploration and change of location. But for the first couple of story arcs, we will be confined in our city. Although confined in the city isn't necessarily as restricting as it sounds, as the city is rather large, being a city and all. What we're seeing here in front of us now is the map of the city as a kind of overhead, just kind of showing the roads, the blocks, and the layout of the city. Now, this is an easier way of looking at it, a lot less to take in right off the get-go. But it, so first we can just look and see this is how the roads are laid out. This side of town tends to have a lot more clustered than the opposite side of town. But let's put all our markers back on the map. So what do we got here? Actually, I'll turn these off for now, and I'll turn these off for now. So we got a couple of text indicators for where things are supposed to go before I fully draw them in. So we got typical structures that you'll see throughout the city. You got your churches, you got your libraries, theaters, private hospitals, public hospitals, fire department, parks, stadiums, and government buildings. There'll even be warehouses and docks. I'm not sure if you call them docks if they're on rivers, but you get the picture. There'll be locations throughout the city that we call back to and we go over. Now let's talk about the factions and how much of the city they own. This will be a small breakdown, as I will be explaining more about the factions themselves in their own video respectively. But I will, for the purpose of... Actually, I'll bring those markers back for a sec. I will be giving brief explanations of what the factions are. So let's just move right along. So first off, this northern area, this kind of segregated area, all to itself, is owned by a faction known as the Church of Repentance. They are, see all the way up here, they are a religious-based faction. Moving right along here are a faction known as the Baba Boon, which are like a faction or group that aren't meant to be taken all too seriously, but they have seemed to manage to take up a good sized portion of the city, considering their tendency to be less important and less serious than the rest of the group and the power struggle throughout the city. This group over here, and that own a little bit of the portion of the city over here, these guys are known as the Umbral Monolith. They are a pretty standard based faction that I can explain more in a future video. Over here are the Copper Precepts. Now these guys serve as the police force or law enforcement for our fictional world here. They have this little area of the city on lockdown, and they do have other departments moved throughout the city, although the amount of power that they hold within the city is rather small in comparison to how law enforcement should work. But it seems that the criminal underworld, or it doesn't need to be really underworldly per se, kind of has a more firm grasp over control of the city, whether that be through racketeering or just respect or what have you. Moving along, we have our main antagonist for the first story arc, at least, which are known as the Spiral Nadar. The Spiral Nadar pose quite the threat to our protagonist faction, which are called the Empire Zenith. Which, they have a small little area of the city as it is right now. As the story moves on, things are subject to change. Some things are subject not to change and will probably stay the same, but a lot of change will probably happen throughout the city, and the coloration of the city can switch back and forth, and who knows, some groups may disappear entirely. Let's take, for instance, this Parliament Square area, which seems to be being controlled by a group called the Stern Six, and they have quite a difficult task maintaining this area, presumably, as they are pressed right up against this group called the Magnari. And as you can see, that they have a pretty strong majority of the city. And our two last remaining groups are known as the Interlocks and the Mental Mercury. The former being an all-male gang, and the latter being an all-female gang. kind of showing some representation for how gangs and factions can be kind of discriminatory, but we're avoiding kind of not avoiding race as a subject, but in this instance, instead of being based off of racial like ethnicity groups or nations that you're from or religious groups, this is just purely based off of gender. And I think that surmises all of the groups. There will be maybe tinier factions that don't necessarily own property or like have enough credit to even like show up on anyone's radar. But they exist throughout the city, and there's smaller groups. There's like freelance groups, but we can get into that at a later point. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you found some sort of entertainment or enjoyment in catching up with this little project that we're working on together. And if it interests you, you can come along and watch some of the live streams, or you can just sit back and wait for these update videos to come out that will kind of streamline the content right to you instead of having to sit through its creation, and you get to kind of experience it in full when it comes out. Or if you really want to experience it in full, you can just wait until the comic comes out. But either way, I'll be making content and you can watch it if you want. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.